Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Rolling with My Homies. I'm your host, Santina Muha. Thank you so much for being here with us today on Outside In Theater. Did you know that it's a non-profit theater and it's new? Your likes and subscribes help our show and all the shows on Outside In's channel. So please like and subscribe as you watch. Okay, so very excited to have my guest here today. This is a guy I've known for a very long time. Not that we're old, because we're not, but we go way back to Jersey. And I'm really excited to have him here because he's been, inspirational to me along my journey as a spinal cord injured person. And I know to many, many others as well. So I'm excited for you guys to hear what he has to say. He is a motivational speaker. He is a life coach, and he is a family man. Please welcome Scott Chesney.
Hey, Santina, such a joy and a pleasure to be with you today, and all your homies. I love homies. That's old. So you're not old enough to say the word homie. That's me. I'm old school here in homie. No one says homie.
Is that for being? Do older men say that? See, what I know it from is Clueless, right? I mean, I know it from other things, but I really love that scene in Clueless where Ty, who people have told me that I remind them of, Brittany Murphy, is rolling with the homies. And, that's what I'm doing.
I love it. That's what you're doing. You just don't hear, you know what? That's a word that makes you smile, not, but you don't hear it enough. So I love that you brought it back. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's so cool. It's so great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. What's new with you? I mean, what's new? What is the latest?
Yeah, well, the latest I have to say, as we were talking about before the show and everything, is just trying to be in the moment as much as possible. And the moment this day, just navigating this pandemic. And also, we just took my daughter. I have a 19-year-old daughter. She just moved into Fordham University.
Oh my gosh, that time. Oh, if I could go back.
This little girl is now all grown up. So it's just, it's amazing. You just kind of like, you blink your eyes and then all of a sudden you have a kid that's in college, and it's mind boggling. But again, trying to be as much in the moment and just to appreciate everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to get to the fact that you have a 19-year-old daughter and how did we get there, right? So let's rewind a little bit.
Oh, it's that kind of show. How do we get? Oh, okay.
No, I don't want to know. Well, yeah, you got it. So let's start with your origin story of, what makes you a homie that rolls, basically. How did you get injured?
So I was actually, my life was all about movement for the first 15 years of my life. And you wouldn't have had seen a wheelchair in my life. There was no understanding of what a wheelchair. There was nothing that people with disabilities that was circulating in my life. And then I was a sophomore in high school, and morning after a high school basketball game, I woke up and my left toe felt numb, like when a part of your body falls asleep, those pins and needles. Thought nothing of it. 48 hours later, that numbness went up one leg, went up a second leg, and left me paralyzed, unable to move and feel normally from about my belly button down to my toes. Now, when you think of paralysis, you think of an accident or an injury. Right. Mine was an illness. They told me like weeks later, months later, that I was born with a malformation of blood vessels, born in my spinal cord. But unless in 1970, I just gave my age away. In 1970, if you did an MRI on me, you would have seen this malformation of blood vessels and maybe wanted to go in and correct some things. But there weren't MRIs back in 1970. So there was no way. I was a healthy kid, healthy baby. And I was told that it was almost like a sleeping volcano in which these blood vessels just burst and bled and created almost like a stroke in the spinal cord. And, I was very fortunate, Santina, in that obviously I lost my legs. That's the unfortunate part. But the fortunate part, I was told like many weeks later when I diagnosed what had happened to me, is that many of the cases before mine occurred in the brain and went down, where the majority of those people never lived. So I was fortunate that it spared my arms, it spared my respiratory system, it spared my brain, it spared my life, and left me a paraplegic. So very early on in my paralysis, I moved to a place of gratitude.
That's really good. Yeah, that's the best way to be. What is it called again? Can you repeat what this was?
Yeah, I didn't even say it. It's a rare AVM, so that's an arterial venous malformation. But the name they give it, and it's interesting that you should ask, because I kind of avoid it because there's a part of me that still wonders, is that exactly what happened? Because they told me it was the 12th documented case ever back in 1986. And it's called foie allogeneic syndrome. And what had happened is that a retired
Janine,
pathologist, that foie, Foix, so it's a French name, allogeneic
it sounds
syndrome.
delicious.
I know, I know. Foie allogeneic syndrome. I don't know why. I think it's because my wife's Indian. I always do everything with an Indian accent, but that tried to come out French there. But it's just very interesting in that a retired pathologist from Africa was visiting a colleague at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City, where I was. And the guy basically said, hey, take a look at this. We have this rare like pathology report. And he looked at it and he's like, oh, I've seen that before. And he basically was the one who diagnosed me. But I guess what I'm fortunate about is that they said, hey, there's nothing else that's going to happen. Like it's run its course. You're not going to become paralyzed any higher now. That's what I'm grateful for. But exactly what happened to me, I still think is a mystery. I still absolutely think is a mystery.
Well, you're not the first person that I've had on this show who's a friend of mine who I didn't realize until I had them on this show that they didn't even know why they were in a wheelchair. I mean, that it was similar stories where it's like, well, the doctors thought it was this and they say it was this, but I mean, that just further proves that, I don't mean to be, gloomy and gloom and doomy, but like nobody is safe from paralysis at any point in their lives, right?
Santi, you know what's funny about this? I was just talking about it at dinner with a bunch of people tonight, is that no one is spared from paralysis because guess what? Because of this pandemic, how many times have you heard the word paralyzed? I feel paralyzed. I can't do this. And when I hear that word, like, really? You're going to tell me you're paralyzed? Are you really, really paralyzed? Or are you just like struggling with a little confinement right now? I was like, let's get into this discussion.
The movies anymore. Yeah, I know. What are you going to do? It's all relative. I mean, what can you do?
I know, it's done. It's done.
So that's really interesting. Okay, so and you were 15. So you said you were in an active basketball playing,
football, basketball, sports were my life. Love sports.
So then how quick, because obviously you said you very quickly had an attitude of gratitude, but how did you get there? I mean, was it quick or?
Oh, it was so quick. And the way I explain it to people, because they talk about like these stages of grief that people go through. And while I believe we can waver in and out, it's not necessarily that type of progression for everyone. For some people, it is like they feel very depressed. They feel lonely. They feel like some like taking their lives, unfortunately. For me, it was almost like, and I say this almost like subconsciously now, it was like a welcome break for me. I got so much attention. I had all the food that I wanted. It was just like I had friends and family. I didn't have to go to school. I ended up getting tutored. But like, honestly, paralysis didn't fully hit me until about 12 years later. Now I had my moments. I had my moments of frustration. I had my moments. I mean, when doctors told me what had happened, that you'd never walk again. I mean, I had my moment of like, oh, this is awful. This is terrible. But I think there was that part of me that was in denial. And I think it was that big because my life, again, was all about movement. I think it was that powerful that I kind of suppressed it. And you know what's interesting, Santina, is that, and I share this through my work now, is that like we can rewind the tape of our lives. We can go back to any moment and kind of like make sense of why we made certain choices and why we did certain things. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely believe in rewinding the tape. I could take myself back to those initial days that I was in the hospital. And I know like this wasn't something that was going on consciously, but subconsciously, I remember family and friends like around my bed and seeing their golf ball shaped eyes with tears in them. And I know that there was a part of me that said, all that pain and sadness you're experiencing, it's far greater than anything I could be feeling right now. So it's like anything that you could say, Scott had every right to feel and everything. I just shut it down. And I think there was that part of me, again, subconsciously, it says, I got to let everyone know that I'm okay. I got to let everybody know that like, I'm going to be up and I'm going to be walking again because I can't deal with everything that I'm feeling from your eyes, from all the emotions that are just welled up inside each and every one of you. So I shut it down. I also know when we shut something down, it's like almost like an imaginary backpack. We just store it in there and it gets heavier And hopefully at some point in our lives, we open it up and give ourselves permission to feel anything, even joy, whatever it is that we're feeling, we give ourselves permission. And that makes the journey much lighter after that. So it was about 12 years later that I finally went back to the drawing board and I grieved over what that 15-year-old kid went through. And it was dark. It was depressing. It was probably the first time in my life that like I seriously, not how I was going to do it, but I seriously did not want to be here anymore. I just did not want to be here anymore.
It's funny you say, and I'm nodding along because even though I was 6 years old when I was injured, I also felt that same responsibility. I was like, I have to make the adults feel okay because they are sadder than I am. And so I had to constantly break the tension with jokes or with, stories. And I think that's what led me to the career I'm in now. But I also years later reflected in a way that I did not do in the beginning. Also, you know what else? I think it's like, when someone dies, a family member, and like at the beginning, everyone, like you said, everyone's coming around, everyone's bringing food, everyone's there. And then once like the week or two after the funeral, when everything calms down, that's when you're like, oh my God, they're gone. They're out of my life. They're not, I can't call them. I can't, because you're like because when someone's first injured or whatever the case, you just, if you're lucky and you have a good support system, you are inundated with support, right?
Right.
By not just your family and your friends, but the hospital staff and everything. And then once everybody tells you what you need to know, they push the bird out of the nest, and then you're like, okay, now what? Where'd everybody go? Where's all my gifts? Where's my morphine on tap? What happened? You know what I mean? So yes, I understand everything that you said. And it's funny because even at 6, I felt the same way you felt at 15. And I bet you some adults would say they felt the same way. So now 15 years or however, about
12 years after that.
12 years later, it hits you. Had you met your wife at that point? Or were you a single guy, or how was that? What did that look like?
I had just met her, and this was right before I started traveling. I took my first trip around the world. So I've taken 2 trips. The first trip I took was when I was about 27, 28 years old. Cool. And I went to 15 countries in 15 months alone, all by myself. 15 countries in 15 months by myself. But 10 days before I left on that trip, I met my wife speaking. She was a physical therapy student in the audience. So, it was almost like you guys aren't ready for one another now, but you kind of need to go your separate ways. But it's almost like a carrot that was dangled in front of both of us, is that through your work and your self-discovery and all this, is that's going to be one of the rewards of your journey that's waiting for you. So, and I started traveling, and I went to some places that were not very accessible at all. And I got to the point, and I'll never forget, I was in Athens, Greece, Santina, and which at the time was not very accessible. Now they've hosted the Olympic Games, in which you have to host the Paralympic Games, in which your whole city gets money to become accessible. And so Athens, Greece is very accessible now.
Really? I didn't know that. That's I wish.
Yes. So that's, again, with the Olympic Games, your city gets a boatload of money to make all these modifications, including making your city more accessible. So, for example, like Madrid, Spain, not very accessible at all. But Barcelona, who hosted, I forget, was it 88, the Summer Olympic Games, so wheelchair accessible. So you hope like every city could be a host for the Olympic Games, because
now I do, yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's amazing. But Athens, Greece at the time I met, when they like made the city out of stone, they did not have us in mind, Santina. I mean, it was the Acropolis, all these places I wanted to visit. It was almost like, I was so far away and I couldn't get close to it. And I remember it was like 3 days. I basically was just doing like room service, and just like, it was the first time in my life where I said, I didn't want to be here. And what's amazing about that, Santina, because it's had so much more to do with my paralysis, is that it's like, here I am, a trip that was paid, all expenses paid, basically told, leave whenever you want, come back whenever you want, speak, study alternative medicine. So I've studied about 70 alternative complementary forms of medicine at their very root, like acupuncture in China, Aboriginal healing in Australia. So like that was my mission, doing all this. But
who sent you on this? Who paid for this?
This is a man who is like my second father, who came into my life through a mutual friend who had dated him in high school, who's a very wealthy individual, but also a man who is just one who connects people. And again, like a second, I lost my father when he was 59 back in 1995. So he assumed an even greater presence in my life when my father passed away. But he's someone who knows himself so well, Santina, that he can understand other people. So he's basically there one day and saying, you know what, he came to visit me when I was living in Miami, Florida. And he said, you know what, Scott, and I was working at the time, I was making good money. And he just said, how would you like to take a trip around the world? All expenses paid, leave whenever you want, come back whenever you want. Maybe study alternative medicines that could help you with your paralysis, but maybe help others with spinal cord injury and paralysis. And almost like my jaw dropped, my tongue probably can't, like, okay. Now, here's the fascinating thing, Santina, is like, I had traveled, I've been to every state in the United States except North Dakota, South Dakota, and Alaska. I haven't been to those three states. Every other state, and I've traveled extensively. I never had a desire to travel abroad, just never hit me, just not some. But the way he put it, I'm telling you, he was speaking to something so deep to say, yes, I need to go. Because I'd gotten to a point in my life, whether it be relationships, whether it be jobs, whether it be money, is I created a life outside myself that you might say, despite him being paralyzed, he's got a pretty amazing life. So we're up in that room and getting back to Athens, Greece, is that this voice inside of me said, stop looking outside yourself for happiness. Go within. Now, Santina, anyone who had always told me to go within, I'm just like, okay, what are you smoking over there? What do you mean go within? This is the world we experience. What do you mean within? And it's until I put up that white flag, it almost hit like a roadblock in terms of what I can create up until that point in my life outside of myself. It was like all signs were pointing to going within. And when I say go within, it's going inside. It's making peace with the past. It's finding out who we are at our very core, not in terms of what people believe that we are, not in terms of images and labels that we put on ourselves, but who we are at our very core. And so meditation, all these things that I had been like approached about, that I had rejected, I finally embraced and said, let me at least explore this, knowing full well I could always come back to this other world. And that's when the world within and outside of myself, it just expanded exponentially. And I couldn't be more grateful. So that's like, and I'm not telling anyone out there that to find yourself, you got to take a trip around the world. You could be living in like Santa Monica, California right now and say to yourself, like, okay, I'm going within now. For me, you know, I needed to get out of my surroundings. I needed that trip around the world. I needed to get away from everything that I knew, move into what I don't know, and begin my journey there. So
what did you think about that particular spot in your journey? Was it because you were stuck, or, you know, in that hotel? Is it because you were like, there isn't, you know, I can't go out, and I'm not going to find happiness in a spanakopita or something delicious that they eat in Greece? I'm always thinking about the food everywhere I go. I'm like, what do they eat? Or is that what it was? It was like almost like a rock bottom.
It was a rock bottom, Santina, but I had basically pushed the limits as to my happiness externally.
Right.
But I had also like the gates were open. So mentally, like I was shot. Physically, from a confined standpoint, in terms of that hotel, in terms of accessibility, I was confined. So it's like all signs were like pointing in this way, and everything else was like being put in my way to just say, nope, can't go there anymore. Nope, this is too frustrating. Nope, this is awful. And so it was almost like, oh, like something was just waiting for me inside. And yeah, it's the unknown, and it's dark, and it's gloomy, and it's beautiful, and it's all the above. And the beautiful thing about it too is that like it's not like there's a single destination. It's just the commitment in terms of wanting to build more self-awareness, getting to know oneself. Because I'm convinced, I am wholeheartedly convinced, and it's at the cornerstone of my work, is that the more that you understand and know yourself, the more you can understand and know other people in a less judgmental way.
Yeah.
And I just believe it's so powerful. And so, while yeah, our journey begins when we're born, I just believe that like it's so many times we're born again, and when we flip that switch and say we want to build more awareness and understand ourselves better, that's when life really gets interesting. That's where the gratitude increases. That's where it's just like, how can I help? How can I serve? Knowing that it's got to begin with me, but then like the greater good, the intention for wanting to do for yourself is wanting to do even more for other people. And that's when it becomes about service. It becomes about purpose in life. And that's when life is just magical. It's just magical.
Yeah. So where was that in your trip? Was it the middle, beginning, toward the end?
That was honestly, so I went to 15 countries in 15 months. That was probably in month number 4 or something.
Okay. So
yeah, I'd gotten to so much frustration and everything. And it
right.
was, I really wasn't enjoying myself that much. And that was part of it. I mean, even though like I'm in these beautiful places, I'm in Paris, France, I'm in here, I'm in England, I'm going down to Brazil. I mean, all these places, it's like I just still was finding a way, and it was all up here. I'm convinced when we live up here is that then it's about fear, disbelief, and playing small in life, and that's kind of the way we're wired to like operate our lives. But I'm convinced when we live from our heart, then it's about courage, expansion, and subscribing to the belief that anything is possible. And once the journey started coming from my heart, that's where it was just like, wow, this is amazing. This journey that I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I want to know where in this 15 countries, where would you say was the most accessible in the first round?
Oh, the most accessible. Oh, and no coincidence that they call Sydney, Australia, San Francisco's sister city, because it's also, for me, it was Australia by far. And I would probably still say that today, based on what other people have shared with me, because I haven't done too much traveling internationally in a while now. But yeah, Australia was probably.
What was so accessible about it? I want to go to Australia so bad. It's just so far. But what was accessible about it?
Oh, I meant the hotels, the tourist attractions, just restaurants. In many ways, I think they at the time got it even more than we get it here. Because I mean, the United States is phenomenal, and with the ADA and a lot of other countries trying to adopt similar laws and rules and regulations, is that we have it great here. Please don't get me wrong. But there are other countries and everything that, really cater to the needs of people with disabilities. And that begins with accessibility.
Yeah,
and
I
so,
think the United States do a better job with accessibility. I really do. I mean,
I'm sorry?
I know the U.S. passed the ADA 30 years ago,
Yep.
And I don't think we've made any leaps and bounds since it was passed, to be honest. I think the United States has work to do in that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying that I don't appreciate what we've already done, and I know that I couldn't, go move to pick a country on the map, but come on.
There's you know what, you're absolutely right. We should be much further ahead than we are. And what still happens is that politics, money, all this stuff still gets in the way. No. And what's interesting, where the real wake-up calls come, is when somebody of influence has a son, a daughter, a loved one, a colleague, or a friend who, I don't want to say becomes disabled, acquires a disability, that another light bulb goes off, and maybe more legislation is passed or more funding is put towards something. But here's the thing is that, and this, Santina, this all too well, is that there is nobody that can say, and I don't say this to scare people, but from the moment that you're born to the moment you die, that you're going to be spared a disability. The likelihood of someone becoming disabled is probably greater because we're living longer. I tell people all the time is that the number of people with disabilities is increasing. Not to say that like medicine and technology isn't good. We're living longer. And the longer that we live, the better our chances are of acquiring some kind of disability. So it's like nearly 20% of the population. The degrees of separation are nothing. We got to stop like ignoring and saying like, we just like wish these people would go away. No, these are our extended brothers and sisters. And here's the funniest thing when we talk about accessibility. is that, and I mean, we're trying at the Reed Foundation, trying to do things with beach accessibility and here in Jersey and different places. But it's just amazing to know when you make something accessible, you're not making it inaccessible to someone else. You're
I
actually
know.
like the beach and everything. I remember like walking on the hot sand. I don't want to do that. I'd rather have like decking down and things that I can step on. And I see
Yeah.
all these legal coolers coming across. And yes, it
Yes,
makes
I
things
just
different.
recently went to Venice. They put one of those long mats down toward the ocean, and I went to check it out. And I was, excuse me, because everybody was using it because they don't want to walk their feet or their bike or their stroller on the sand. So, exactly my point. Everybody could benefit from accessibility. It drives me
You're
nuts. It drives me
100% correct.
nuts.
100% correct.
Oh, well, thank you for so much for advocating for beach accessibility because that's a huge, I mean, as a Jersey Shore girl, I spent more days on the beach than not every summer of my life. And that's one of the things that I felt like was taken away from me because it's not a place where I feel like I can be independent on sand. Sand and wheelchairs make oil and water look like best friends, right? So you can't do it. And I love the beach, and I don't love having to ask somebody, "Can you take me there? Can you put me there?" I mean, and it just doesn't feel relaxing when I'm just having to rely on somebody all day.
Yeah, you know what, Cynthia? Up until I'm even going to say maybe 5 years ago, is that was the struggle for people with mobility disabilities. And I was the Benny. I was the guy from northern New Jersey who came down 3 weeks out of the year down to Lavallette, New Jersey, and with my family and everything. But when I became paralyzed, is that our summers at the Jersey Shore ended because my families didn't want to do that because you didn't see people with disabilities, and they know that my life of movement was not going to be had by being lifted and carried on and like plopped in a chair on the beach and watching everybody else move around. Now people are getting into the ocean. Now people are like able to come and go. They're able to drive, to do different things. So it's like so many things are able to be experienced now because of just more insight, better technology, and just people who
Yeah,
are relentless. We
it's
have a person
slow.
up there, Sabrina Cohen. Do you know Sabrina?
No, actually, I don't.
Okay, she's down in Florida and down
In a
in
wheelchair?
in a wheelchair. She's a
Okay,
quadriplegic,
well,
but
that proves to everybody that we don't all know each other, okay? So I really truly don't know her, which is rare, but it's
she's great though. But she's the pioneer. She's like down in Miami, Florida, to the point where like almost like every weekend they have a specific beach down there that's fully accessible. They get volunteers to help out. You want to go swimming, fine. You want to sit on the beach, fine. You want to kayak, fine. And so she makes it happen. So just phenomenal individual like yourself.
well, I love that, and I sometimes I do feel like it's getting better, but like we're almost fighting for crumbs because like there's a really cool in Santa Monica. There's this beach stand, one of those places that they rent bikes and stuff, and they have an electric chair for the beach, an electric wheelchair that goes on sand. It has like tank wheels, and I'm obsessed with this thing because when I'm in, I know they have the ones with the big rubber wheels, and I've been
Yep.
on this since I was little, but those you still need someone to push you, right? But this electric one, I'm zooming up and down all by myself. I'm collecting shells. I'm just chasing the seagulls. I mean, I haven't felt like this since I was 5 years old. I cried the first time I went in it, but there's only one. So like last week, I actually went to the beach with my stepsister who lives out here, and we got there 2 minutes after this woman got there who needed it. And so I'm watching her help her mother get into the chair, and I had to go and use the manual one and get pushed. And I almost fell out, 2 times because it's like we're getting there, but you can't just do one of something and go, okay, California, you have one, bye. That's not enough. So we got to keep fighting because they have like 50 bikes, maybe more, like
Yep.
100 bikes on the lot, and they're not using all the bikes all the time. I've never been there and every bike has been out, never.
No, I know. Again, it's what you said before is that, well, we have made strides and things are better. They could be much better, and
Yeah.
they should be much better based on where we live now and the time and
Yes.
in the history of the world. I mean, we absolutely should be past this.
I know, Scott, you're very positive, and that's really great, but I am here to to really just throw a little Jersey sauce on it and make sure that we don't rest. But yeah, I know that even.
Right. No, you're right. No, and I appreciate that because you know what and the reality is that we are in a good place, but we could be in a much better place. And so thank you for reminding me of that.
Well, we're getting there. We're getting there. Well, speaking of positive, because I mentioned before you're a motivational speaker, right? So can you tell me a little bit about how you how do you become a motivator? What was that process like?
I think it's different for everyone, but at the time I was in my, it was my first job out of college. I was in public relations. I was director of research for this small public relations firm. And I enjoyed my work, but I was in a cubicle and I was working with different clients on the phone or coming to see me in person. But yeah, I just felt like a little confined, and it wasn't because of the wheelchair. I just felt like there was something more that was out there. So this opportunity came about with the Miami project to cure paralysis. They had a fundraising, they still do, a fundraising arm called the Bonacani Fund. And so there was an opportunity there to begin to speak for them. So I became director of corporate outreach for them. And that took me on the road, speaking to organizations about the research that was ongoing at the Miami project, but also sharing my story. And I just felt that I was so much in my element. I was able to help them raise millions of dollars for spinal cord injury research. And that's when like the opportunity came from like my second father, who was just like, it's great what you're doing, but there's another platform that's waiting for you. Because I absolutely, I started doing a little speaking on my own before I started traveling, but then there was just so many audiences that were waiting for me during my travels. So would speak to anyone who would listen. So it was rehab centers in the beginning, then people from the hotel industry who wanted to make things more accessible. Then it was general audiences. I just felt like my message continued to expand, that went from kind of talking about my life to helping people with their lives. And so that's where the work that I was doing on myself, getting to know myself, is that I started to understand other people. I kind of had a sense of some of the patterns and habits that I had created in my life, and then did some research and then learned more about other people. And so what's interesting is that ended up trickling into life coaching. So this is funny. I was actually in Australia at the time. I had just gotten done with a presentation, probably had a couple thousand people that were in my audience. And what happens after every presentation, usually even after the Q&A, you have a lineup of people who want to either share something with you private, and in which they didn't want to share with the whole audience, or they want to tell you something. And I'm there and I'm talking to them all the time, but there's always one at the end, Santina, who's there. And sometimes they'll call them stragglers, but these are the people who want a little bit more of your time and want to share a little bit more, knowing full well there's not a last person that's waiting behind them. And so this last person who's waiting for me just said, Scott, that was phenomenal. I was like, oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed the presentation. She's like, the presentation was great, but what you've been doing for the last 40 minutes? I was like, you mean talking to my audience members? And she's like, no, the life coaching. I was overhearing this. I had never heard the term before. So she said, I was like, what's life coaching? So she explained it to me, and I was like, damn, and people get paid for this? And so I was like, oh, so right away I started looking into this, and I was like, wow. I was like, absolutely a great compliment to speaking. Now, beautiful thing about this is that you have some people who begin as life coaches who want a bigger platform and end up becoming speakers from there. But you have a lot of speakers like myself, because I'm not speaking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nor do I want to. So it gives me an opportunity, whether I'm in the hotel and virtually, which I was even doing before the pandemic, or like to connect with people. If you're within a certain mile radius of where I'm either performing or where my home office is that, yeah, we can have a face-to-face that way, but taking advantage of technology and being able to help people to access their own blueprints professionally, personally. I honestly, Santina, is that I have found my passion. I have found my purpose. This is what I am meant to do. And for me, it's about appreciating where I am in my work and what I'm doing, but it's also about constant, never-ending improvement. So I say that because so many people I'm coaching these days are just like so driven, so passionate, and just like constantly striving and striving and striving, and they're getting stressed out and they're burning out. So you might say, but why? They're so driven, they're so passionate. Is that they're not appreciating the moment. So that's where that gratitude, wherever it is. I was telling an audience the other day, I was like, I want you to want the world. Go after whatever it is that you want personally and professionally. But do me a favor, make what it is that you have just a little bit stronger here and now than what it is that you want. That means gratitude is reigning supreme. And the want is still there, but it's being dictated by what you already have. So to anyone who's listening to this right now, I want you to want the world, but imagine if nothing changed in your life. How appreciative, how much more appreciative could you be for what it is that you have right here, right now?
Would you say that your clients, what would you say is the ratio of clients with disabilities with to without?
Oh, I would say 20-30% of my life coaching clients have some type of disability.
So that's great. So it's just,
yeah. So it's gotten to a point now where people will hire me. Obviously, they know about the wheelchair. They've heard about my story, but I've had so many audience members tell me within the past 5 years, let's say, said, Scott, like I came here because of this. I wanted to hear your story, hear about how you're overcoming paralysis. And within the first like 10, 15 minutes, absolutely forgot you were in a wheelchair. That's where I absolutely love my work, that it's a story. I have a story to share, and I hope that my story connects with others and everything. We all have stories, and we got to get to know other people's stories. But when you get to that point where realizing that, wow, he's making a connection and it's got absolutely nothing to do with his physical condition, that's where transformation can take place. That's where people are accessing their own blueprints, relating them to mine or relating them to someone else and saying, what can I learn from? Everyone that comes into our life has a message for you and you have a message for them. Imagine if you kind of went into the world that way, wherever it is that you're going next, and saying whether it's that president of that company or that person who doesn't know where his or her next meal is coming from, is that they have a message for me. I have a message for them, and they're planted in your journey to help you almost like a scavenger hunt to find out what's next. What are you going to discover? And that way, Santina, it makes life so fascinating, so intriguing. And it's like, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
It makes life exciting.
Yeah, well, we have to go back to a seed that we planted before, because I know everybody's gonna. Well, this is like exciting for me because this is like the tea part. So you met this girl, you're speaking, you meet her, your eyes.
Let me tell you the story real quick. So
okay.
This is 10 days before I started traveling. Is that I'm in Atlantic City, American Physical Therapy Association's like annual conference and everything. Is that I have one of maybe 6 or 7 like rooms that I'm in which you have a choice between all these speakers. So my wife, or my future wife, I should say, who is a physical therapy student, no joke, she says to her friend as they're looking through like this like program, let's go see what this poor pathetic guy in a wheelchair has to say. I am not kidding. That's what she said to her friend. So they're there. Okay. I get introduced. I come out on stage. Now, mind you, again, I'm getting ready to travel around the world in 10 days. That's where my primary focus is, even though like I'm getting paid to speak to these people throughout the day and everything, is that so I'm zeroing in on this. I'm not thinking about meeting anybody. I'm just thinking about delivering the most powerful message that I can. So I get introduced, I come out on stage, I look a few rows back, and all of a sudden it was like my jaw just dropped. 10 seconds goes by, Santina, 15, 20 seconds, about 30 seconds goes by. People behind stage who introduced me, who are paying me to speak, are like, Scott, you're on. No joke, if you were to look out, you saw everybody kind of open up their programs. To this day, I'm thinking people are wondering, does he also have a mental disability? We got to give him a little bit of time to warm up. I regained my composure. I started talking. Probably, she says, within 5 or 10 minutes, she tapped her friend on the shoulder, said, I don't know who that man is, but that's the man I'm going to marry and spend the rest of my life with. Now, exactly 2 years from the day that we met, Santina, we were married.
Okay, so so was she a straggler, or how did you meet besides?
No. So I'm so glad you asked that question. So after my talk, there's like a luncheon in which we're all invited to when we're there. And I'm seeing from afar, and we're kind of like smiling at each other, and there's this flirtation thing going on. So I approach her, and all of a sudden we're in Atlantic City. It's raining outside. There's nothing to do except kind of like go gambling. So I was just said to her, I was like, hey, would you like to go gambling and everything? And she was just like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, don't do me any favors. But what I didn't realize, so there were a lot of people that I knew at this conference. I hadn't dated or anything, just a lot of people through my circles of friends and everything that I knew, some of them which consisted of women. So she was a part that's thinking like, oh my God, all these other girls that he probably like asked said no. I'm like the last one. Like, and so anyway, we ended up going and doing the slot machines, and I just started putting money. I must have blown about $75 in the course of 15 minutes, didn't win anything, but all I remember is this girl just having so much fun, pulling a slot machine and just having the time. So basically we just like decided to keep in touch. I sent her postcard. Oh, that was a big revelation for me. You're going to laugh at this one, Santina. I didn't realize that with postcards that you send to people, oh, I'm so embarrassed by this one. Like, I thought you looked at the name, and if it wasn't for you, you kind of turn it over and you don't read it. I didn't realize. So I wrote all this stuff in which her family, like a very traditional conservative Indian family, is reading. And I just didn't know. I thought they would see like her name on it. Okay, it's not for me. That's what I used to do with postcards. If they want to share it with you afterwards, that's fine. But anyway, yeah, so we ended up reuniting when we got back. We had done the work that we needed to do on ourselves, and it was just like we just picked up where we left off. And yeah,
because it's not like you were IMing or FaceTiming or texting. I mean, that didn't.
No, we got on the phone. So I would get on the phone, and all of a sudden her mom would grab the phone because she had heard about me and everything. Hey, Sky, where are you? Where are you? I won't do the Indian accent because I'll get in trouble from someone.
So you kept in touch while you were on your journey, and then you came back, you went out, you guys, and then, you had your thing, and then you proposed, you got married, and then you started having kids. I really want to talk about fatherhood because, just parenting in general interests me, because I don't know, maybe, if the cards fall that way for me, like that may be the next part of my life. I don't know. We'll see. But it's very interesting to me at this age, thinking about parenting with it, it from a wheelchair. Yep. So can you talk to me a little bit about like, anything that has surprised you or anything that you thought, either this is going to be really hard and it wasn't, or vice versa. Like I didn't even think twice about that. And that sucked, anything like that.
Well, you know what? Being able to father my own children has always been more important to me than walking again. I can't speak on behalf of anyone else with any type of physical or mobility disability. But for me, I was told I'd never be able to walk again. I'd never be able to father my own children, is that I hung on to that fathering my own children because there was something.
When you say father my own children, you mean like
from a biologically
father.
But I do want, and I'm very sensitive about this, please. And it's still something my wife and I talk about doing, is adopting a child. Please, if we were blessed to adopt a child, that would still be my child. That would still be all the love in the world that I have to give. So I don't want them to think like adoption was something that like I never wanted. No, that wasn't the case, but I wanted to, from a biological standpoint, have my own child.
Okay.
Just something that I wanted. And I actually went from a 2% chance. So I was tested before I left on my second trip around the world that I took with my wife. 2% chance. And when I got back from that trip, so we ended up going to 26 countries in 1 year. And when we got back, I was retested and I had a 55% chance of fathering my own children.
Yeah, but let me guess, did you go to Italy?
Did I go to Italy?
Did you?
No, I did go to Italy, but wait, I don't know the connection here.
Because their food is so fresh. It's like it can do magic. I'm convinced. I
Well,
go
it
to
put
Italy
10
and I
pounds
lose
on me.
weight.
I
What?
put 10 pounds on when I went to Italy. I put
Well,
so
I
much
lose
weight
weight,
on.
but there's something about something about the Italian. I don't know. Please.
That
I know that has nothing to do with it.
No, it could. Here's the thing. It absolutely, since we went to Italy, it could have been that. But
I don't know.
I tapped into something that I realized was at it was the common denominator among all these alternative complementary forms of medicine that I had explored, in which I witnessed almost like miracles happen with people from all around the world. And the common denominator was belief, the power of belief. I absolutely believe you put enough unshakable belief behind something simple as massage, is that amazing things can happen. But it's so difficult because of the way we're wired, because of the past that we've had, to really be able to, and I don't want to judge, but to have that laser type focus. So, you know what, when I came back and I was almost told that I had like a 55% chance of having my own child, I kind of knew that based on some of these things that I did, is that I know that I improved my chances. I know. So I'm in a place, Santina, is that just as I believe on some level we can manifest illness, disability, you name it, is that I believe that we can heal ourselves of it too. It's almost like whatever it is that we create in our lives, we can uncreate in our lives. And so when going from a 2% chance to a 55% chance, is that I was thrilled, but I wasn't shocked. I wasn't stunned. And I still know that that wasn't necessarily going to produce a child. We had to go the in vitro route. So what happened with me is that, can I get into some of these details or no?
Yeah, please.
Oh, okay. Like my swimmers don't come out of me. They're kind of like shy and they stay inside and everything. So they don't go swimming. So what doctors ended up doing is having to go inside and go get them. And what's interesting, when the doctors went inside, I think it's called ICSI or something like that. I don't know what it stands for. But when they went inside to go get these, is that he told me, because I was out, I was under anesthesia, is that he said that Scott was just about ready to stop. And he just thought, like, what if I go up into this cavity like a little bit more? And it's like there was like a clog, like a pipe that was clogged. And he's like, I unclogged it. And I asked him, I was like, what does this mean? He goes, Scott, if you wanted to impregnate the whole Eastern seaboard, you probably could. And I was just like, hear me, like I never felt more primal my entire life. I was like, oh, I was just so excited. I was just like, wow, and everything. But anyway, so we took some of these great swimmers, is that I had to inject my wife. We had to go the in vitro route and everything. And this is where just putting life into perspective, which I always try to do with myself and try to help other people with. We're there in centers where people are trying to have children, reproduction centers. And the first two times we tried, we were successful. Is that I have a 19-year-old daughter. I have a 16-year-old son now. There are people 2 years, 5 years, 10 years who maybe don't have any type of physical disability, but for whatever reason, and the anguish and the stress, and just like my heart, we've met so many of these people, and knowing full well that a good portion of them are going to not be able to fulfill that dream, but yet if they wanted to, we're going to be able to adopt and still give all that love that they had in their heart to a child. I'm not sure if everyone would want to do that route, but hopefully many of them did. But it's just interesting when you take your situation, it's almost like I tell people, feel your feelings, and like if it's anger, if it's sadness, whatever it is that you need to feel. But then like within a period of time, put it into perspective. How much worse could this possibly be? How much more damaging could this be? How much like is going on in this world in which, you know what, things could be so much worse for you. Like, so put it into perspective. But I don't say ignore it. I don't say, like, if people see me and they see, like, sometimes they'll say, well, Sky, I see you in a wheelchair moving on with your life and everything. It's like, don't worry about what's going on with it. I was like, no, you tell me what's going on with you. If 2-3 weeks from now, you're still sitting on like, or having like a pity party and you need to bring like an image that, like, Scott's moving on with his life, then so be it. I'm cool with that. But never, whatever's going on with you, is that acknowledge those feelings, feel those feelings, but then put it into perspective. Put it into perspective.
Yeah. So, okay, you had the both of your children, and then you were a father. And what was it like being a father in a wheelchair? I mean, what was harder, easy, surprising?
You know what? I was worried. And here's an interesting thing, Santina. I don't share this with many people, is that I want to say 6 weeks before my wife gave birth to our daughter, our first child, I went to see a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. I had never in my life been to a psychiatrist before. And it wasn't so much that I was in a place where I just wanted to be the best dad. And I wanted to know if there was anything that I was like avoiding or not diving into and holding back. And like, we discussed a few things and went over it, but you know, it was just something like I still laugh because in my town of Verona, you have to basically get a license to go fishing in a lake that's in our town. You have to fill out a form to get a library card. You actually have to pass a test to get your driver's license. Santina, you're very educated, and being a Jersey girl, highly educated. Let me ask you, do you know what you need to become a parent? Nothing. They will send anybody home.
I know.
From the hospital with the kid. And yet it's the most important and most challenging job in the world. But yet it's almost like, here you go have fun. And so I'm looking at your face right now, and I'm not meaning to scare you, because all I'm saying is that this is on-job training. The beautiful thing,
exactly.
One moment I'll never forget. So my daughter was born in November. So right around winter time. And so it was snowing one day, and my daughter was in the crib, and I meant in the playpen. So she was down close to the ground, and like, I have a little bit of difficulty with balance and trunk balance. Right. So my wife was like, I want to go out there before like too much snow comes and just shovel a little bit. I was like, go. I have Nia. That's my daughter's name, Nia. And she's like, how are you going to get her out of there? I was like, honey, just go. I'm okay. I'm not very good at shoveling. I pay people to shovel now and everything, but she wanted to go out there for a while. So she went out there, and right when she went outside the door, Nia started crying. So I looked into the playpen, and I just like looked into these beautiful brown eyes. She's got a onesie on. And all of a sudden I was just like, we're going to do this. And I remember, if you can see, let me pull down this camera. Is that I grabbed her right from here, not like her skin or anything, but I grabbed her onesie right here, and I said, okay, you're going to hold that neck straight, because I don't want like going back or anything, because I could only hold on to my chair with one hand and then grab, and I'm strong enough to lift her up. So I said, I'm doing this, and her neck was straight, and she's just looking at me, and I brought her up, and I was able to put her on my lap, and I'm there, and she ended up falling back asleep. My wife came in, she's like, how did you do that? And what's interesting, it became our thing. And my son, when he was born, so what I'm saying is that we adapt as our kids get a little bit older. Like, they don't know any different. They only know that dad's in a wheelchair. They only know that now, when they got to be a certain age, my son didn't do this, but my daughter did. Like, when she knew that like she did something wrong, she would hide on top of furniture or go places that I couldn't reach. I wish she was watching right now. But, no, it's just, it's so interesting though, is that I do a lot of parent programs too, parent workshops. And one of the first parent programs that I did after actually having children is that I said, parenting's like heaven and hell. And all of a sudden I just had like one of my audience members said, did you just describe parenting as hell? And I looked at him, I was like, absolutely, isn't it? And they just started like laughing. And I said, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because whether it be paralysis, whether it be parenting, whether it be work sometimes, whether it be anything in my life, is that where my biggest growth experience has taken place have been in those moments of heaven and also moments of hell.
Yeah.
It's led
But
me
you
up.
know, not only do people with disabilities adapt faster than anyone, so do children. So you put those two together and it's gonna work. It's just gonna work. I mean, I've spoken to other moms in wheelchairs and they've all given that's like it's like animals do that too, right? They pick up their young by the scruff of their neck, and it's just the way. And I know that, like, I've had dogs that have become like can jump onto my lap because they know that that's what they need to do, or they can. So, you know, animals, babies, and people with disabilities, I think, are the most adaptable of
Got
all
it. You got it.
I
And
really do.
I'm just saying this because I do know you well enough. And I just want to say you have so much love in your heart. You have so much creativity. You have so much patience and humor inside of you. If it's something that you would like to do, you would make a phenomenal mother. And for all the fear and everything that you have, that's absolutely understandable. If there's ever a parent out there that tells you that they're not scared more than any other time in their life, they're fooling you. So it's not like anything, being afraid, boom, going into your heart, finding where that courage is and moving forward in the face of fear. And parenting is a great example of that.
It is something I'm hoping happens at some point. We'll see. I froze my eggs. You know, I did that. So I've taken steps towards it, and we'll just have to see what happens. I don't know.
Awesome.
But I really, really appreciate it. We're coming to the end of our hour. Can you believe it?
No, I thought this was a 24-hour program. No.
Yeah, it's a telethon. I really appreciate you being here, Scott. Is there anything else that that you want to tell the people before we go? I know I want everybody to watch your documentary, Ride the Wave, to get a little bit more info about Scott and what he's done. And I know that it's a metaphor. It's not just the surfing, but it's life, right? So, like, where can people go to watch this documentary?
If they go to my website, they can see a trailer there, but they can also access the movie as well. So it's just my name, scottchesney.com. And yeah, and as you said, riding the wave, I do a lot of adaptive surfing, but it's the bigger story is its metaphor in life is that, you know, if you're a lover of the ocean, I think all of us can appreciate the ocean, even if it's from afar, and how beautiful it is, but also how turbulent is that. It's kind of like you have the peak of the wave, that those are those moments that you wish never ended in life. And we have those, but they're only moments. And then there's moments where, you know what, we're in the valley of the wave. And those are moments in our lives when, you know what, we fail, we struggle, we have challenges in our life. Those are the moments we wish came to a complete end immediately. But they never last either. So it's the combination of the two, and knowing full well that, you know what, there's always another wave that's waiting for us to ride, maybe a little bit better, a little bit more effectively, a little bit with more awareness based on the last wave that we rode. So it's a great film. It's making its way around the world still, and people from all walks of life are accessing it. So I would love for all your viewers to ride the wave if or whenever the time is right.
Yeah, my mom always says, "This too shall pass." She always says that.
She's a smart lady.
That's so true. And so please, everybody, go watch that. Is there anything else that you want to say before we have to go?
I would say one thing, just in terms of advice, and I'm learning there's so much more in my life. We're constantly in motion, we're constantly moving, but I'm realizing the power of pausing. Just taking a moment and pausing before you say something, before you act a certain way, pausing before you text something, pausing before you post something, and just, you know what, is this something that is going to better my life? Is this something that's going to better the recipient's life? And I think this power of pausing is something that is so profound, and it's something that the rational mind doesn't think is productive. But I'll tell you right now is that your heart wants you to pause. It wants you to take a moment. It wants you to take things in, but also process things before you share them as well.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. It was so great to have you. I never noticed your Jersey accent before, but now that I live out here, got one. Did you know you had one?
Which words gave it away?
I don't remember, but it's in there. It's in there.
It's in there. See, being from Jersey, you probably, because most people don't have a clue. They're like, where are you from? I'm not quite sure. And I was like, I don't know.
No,
I
no,
don't.
it's there, and it's a joy to hear. Believe me, I watch Real Housewives of New Jersey as like warm milk background noise. I love it. But thank you so much, Scott. And everybody, where can people reach you if they want to hire you as a speaker or a motivational speaker or a life coach or just whatever? Where can people find you? Facebook, whatever.
It's my website. If you go to scottchesney.com, you will see all the social medias, that Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, everything that you would want to do to connect with me, you can find it there. So scottchesney.com.
Facebook support groups and things like that you run as well, right?
Exactly. I'm an ambassador for the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, so doing a lot of work to help them as well. So yeah, all the ways that they want to get in touch with me, and even if like they want to just ask me a question based on what we experienced here, just shoot me an email that you'll see on there as well, and we'll make it happen.
Okay, well, there you go. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on Outside In Theater tonight. You can find out everything going on with Outside In Theater at www.outsideintheater.org. And for everything going on at the physical and digital spaces, there will be a physical space coming soon. And don't forget to follow me on social media at Santina Muha. That's it. Thanks, everybody, for watching Rollin' with My Homies. We'll see you next time. Stay safe. Bye.